Hey, everybody, welcome to day two of World History. I hope you had a great day one, and maybe now you can see what I look like without a mask on. But I'm going to kind of cover some nuts and bolts with you today, as well as do a couple of small lectures, and then allow you to practice your understanding of the materials we cover today. So, first of all, I want to just make sure you understand how to get around Schoology a little bit. So when you open up Schoology, you should see the first page of Honors World History, and you should click on Unit 1 Basic Skills. When you get to Unit 1 Basic Skills, you're going to see a bunch of days, okay? And this is the primary page I'd like you to go to on a regular basis. And you're going to notice it says Day 1, Syllabus, Course Atlas, and Pretest. This is all the stuff we did either on Monday for you or on Tuesday, depending on what day you're taking this class. So, a couple of things that this shows you. It not only has what our agenda is for the day, but it also has what your homework is. So, this was your homework for yesterday's class or for whichever day you were there. And then if you click on the folder itself, it will take you to the nuts and bolts, or at least the actual documents that you might need to complete the tasks at the start of the folder. So you'll see a bunch of stuff located here. And I want to point out a couple of these things for you. So this is some of the stuff we did yesterday. If we did it in class, don't worry about doing it by yourself, unless I specifically tell you you need to also do it by yourself. So sometimes you're going to see stuff from class. So for instance, there's this mapping activity in there. That is kind of the lecture that I had. So if you also have questions about the lecture that was in class, here's a good place to go and follow along and get the information that you might need. A couple of things I want to point out here. First of all, I want to point out the Honors Course Atlas. This is a list of the countries, cities, rivers, mountains, and other locations that you're going to need to know for this class in the coming weeks. Yeah, you get to memorize all the countries of the world, as well as many of the major cities, rivers, and other locations. So this is where you're going to find that information. Another thing that you're going to need to do is click on here, and I need you to fill your name or sign your name to this document. And this document talks about not sharing information with other students who are not in class with you. Very important, especially this year with COVID and the fact that we've got an alternate A and B day, is that you don't share information with your friends. And this is going to be on the honor system. It's up to you to make sure that you are respecting this for this class. Probably one of the most important things you're going to do today is understand how to click on your learning targets. Sometimes I call this the grade tracker. This is how you are going to be keeping track of how you are progressing in this class. So for Unit 1, which is what we're in, these are more the content learning targets. In other words, there's several key curriculum pieces in this document that you are going to be required to know for the test. And then you also have some reading learning targets. This one is a little bit more throughout the year. These are kind of skills that you're going to be developing throughout the year. But if I click on this one for you, this is actually also in a way, your review sheet. So when you click on this Unit 1 learning targets, by the way, really important, if you ever click on something in the Schoology folder and it says not accessible or something like that, try clicking on this right upper hand corner, because this will actually open it up in a new page. And so oftentimes that's the problem. So all you got to do is click up here and it'll take you to where you want to go. So when you open up these Unit 1 content learning targets here, I want to just walk through this with you real quickly. You're going to see, for instance, yesterday we covered, I can explain the concept of ethnocentrism and recognize examples. Now, in class, we kind of did this together. So this stands for FA, formative assessment. And so we kind of did in that class. How did you do? Do you recognize ethnocentrism? Do you understand it? Can you point out examples? So if you did that in class, you can give yourself a score of 3 or 4 or whatever it is on your first form of assessment. Then the second one, you took a quiz on ethnocentrism. So this might be the second formative assessment. Got 100% on that? Great. If not, give yourself a lower grade. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do is notice that a lot of the formative assessment quizzes that we have for you in this class, there are going to be multiple opportunities to take those. And so, highly, highly suggest that when you take one of the quizzes, you give yourself some extra time so that you can take it again if you don't get 100. The goal is for you to really understand the material before that test, and taking the quizzes multiple times is a way to do this. And sometimes there might be less than 3 formative assessments. Sometimes there might be more than 3 formative assessments, but these are just areas where you can fill out to see if you are prepared for this class and for that particular standard on the test. Then once we take the test, you'll fill out what difficulties you might have had. Actually, I'm sorry, you'll fill this out before you get to the test, just to highlight and just to figure out for yourself where you have to really study for the test. Then once you take the test, you're going to keep track of how you did on the test and then what type of errors you might have possibly made. So that is the Unit 1 content learning targets. Make sure you familiarize yourself with how to do that. You're going to want to download that and store it on your desktop and have it available all the way through the end of the first unit. All right, at this point, I would like you to do the blank map opening activity. So you're going to pause this video, and then you are going to go to the Honors World History opening activity for the day 2. For day 2, it's in the day 2 folder. All right. Hopefully that was not too difficult for you. What we're going to do next is we're just going to take a look at these regions here. So hopefully you can see this going on. And hopefully you got 100% on this. It shouldn't have been too difficult, but it's kind of important for us to understand where the regions of the world are, so that when I say, hey, in South Asia, this is the primary economic activity, or in the Middle East, this is, the primary type of government, et cetera, that you know what I'm talking about as we classify the countries into these world regions and as we talk about the different regions of the world. So make sure you can do that. And the next thing I want to talk about as kind of a really probably the more difficult subject area today, and that is the world history eras. One of the things that we would like you to do is to be able to identify the eras of world history. Now, in your middle school years, you should have actually covered eras 1 through 3, which is basically from beginning of history through about 300 AD, or the more common term today is CE. CE means Common Era, AD means Anno Domini, which is basically means, it's Latin for in the year of our Lord. And the Western culture is based on a Christian calendar, which is about basically starts with year 0 when they thought the birth of Christ was. And so that's where we get that AD from. Well, more recently, people have said, well, let's call it, we don't want to use, a Christianity, framework. So let's just call it CE, which means Common Era. And then before Christ was born, or before Common Era, would be BCE. So that's how you'll typically more see it today. In my class, we'll use AD and CE interchangeably, as well as BC and BCE. Just understand that those are the same thing. So you've already really studied up to 300 CE in middle school. And so we're going to pick up with Era 4, which is expanding and intensified hemispheric interactions. And this era is from about 300 to about 1500. Now, they're not specifically set in stone dates. It's not like they woke up in 1501 and were like, dude, we're out of the Era 4 now. Now we're in Era 5. It's something that historians just try to help classify things so that they can more easily help you understand what's going on. And so, for instance, there's a lot of change in the world right around 1500. For instance, 1492, Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue, right? And you get the two worlds are now combined. And so, really, as you're studying this and you want to try to be able to identify expanding and intensified hemispheric interactions, it seems like a big name, but really, if you break it down, it's not that big of a deal. Think about it, expanding, in other words, getting bigger, growing, right? And intensified, so getting more intense, becoming more common, happening more often, etc. Hemispheric interactions. Hemisphere is half the world. So if you think about it, since the Christopher Columbus doesn't sail until 1492, really the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere really don't even know they exist, that each other exists. And so there's interactions between peoples in the Western Hemisphere, there's interactions between people in the Eastern Hemisphere, but not between the two. And so therefore, the interactions between those people in the different hemispheres is expanding and intensifying. And that's where we get the name of this era. So during this era, we will study how groups of people were expanding their interactions and intensifying their interactions within that hemisphere. That brings us to the next era, Era 5, the emergence of the first global age. And basically, Christopher Columbus introducing the worlds to each other basically means that now the world has become connected. And that's going to lead to the age of exploration. It's going to mean that you've got the Columbian exchange, and both plants and people and animals are going to start exchanging and moving all over the place. And so this becomes the emergence of the first global age, which is the 15th to the 18th centuries. Now, notice there's some overlap. When we say the 15th century, you need to understand in history that that means 1400s. 18th century means 1700s. We always talk about the century that you're in as being 1 year ahead of the hundreds of years that you're in. So 18th century is the 1700s. Make sure you understand that. Era 6 then is the age of global revolutions, and that's basically from the 1700s to 1914. One easy way to remember this one is if you think of some revolutions that you might know, like, I don't know, the American Revolution, or the Industrial Revolution, or the Scientific Revolution. Oh, that one's a little bit earlier. Maybe think of the French Revolution. And there's a lot of great change that's happening once the world has become more connected. So historians consider this the age of global revolutions. The next era is Era 7, and that is global crisis and achievement. That's basically from around 1900 to 1945. Can you think of any global crises that might have happened from 1900 to 1945? If you thought World War I and World War II and Great Depression, those would be some of the crises that were happening at that time. But it was also a time of achievement. And so 1900 and 1945, this is probably the smallest era that we're dealing with as far as time-wise. And we're going to look at global crisis and achievement during that time. And then Era 8 is the Cold War and its aftermath, which is 1945 to present. And I think eventually historians will basically at some point say we're really in Era 9. Because what is the aftermath? I think you'll eventually find that they're going to say Era 8 is the Cold War, which is like 1945 to 1991 or so. And then I don't know what age we're living in now. I mean, it could be the technological age. There's a variety of things that we could call it. Who knows? Historians will probably come back later and figure that out. Anyway, so these are the eras that we're going to be covering, and I want you to be able to know these different eras. You'll have to know them throughout the year. So one of the basic things that you can do right now is pause the video and put these different ages in order. Go. Okay. Hopefully you were able to pause the video and do that fairly easily. For the homework tonight, there's a couple of quizzes. Again, we're looking at for you to know the regions of the world and also for you to know and identify the eras. And so I need you to do those two things with your quizzes. Those are in the Day 2 folder. Also, make sure you're downloading your grade tracker tonight and becoming familiar with that. Remember, it's called Unit 1 Learning Targets. So make sure you're doing those two things for your homework tonight. And I hope you've enjoyed day 2 of Honors World History. Now I just have to find a way to click off here. All right. See you tomorrow, everybody.